Good morning, and welcome to our webinar on cattle culture quality, navigating vitamin forms in feed. My name is Alex Centeno, and I'm the Ruminant Marketing Manager for North America at dsm-firmenich, and I will be your moderator today. First, let's go through some logistical details. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. The recording will be shared via email with all registrants later today. You can ask questions at any point using the Q&A button at the top of your screen. We will cover as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation, but if we do run out of time, we'll follow up with you after the presentation is over. All attendees are anonymous, but if you do ask a question, please note that your name will become visible with your question unless you submit it anonymously. Now, let me introduce today's presenter, Dr. Zeno Hubbert. Dr. Hubbert began her career in the animal feed industry in South Africa after obtaining her master's degree in dairy nutrition from the University of Pretoria. After gaining 10 years experience as a commercial nutritionist with involvement in central formulations, feed milling, research, and technical consulting, she relocated to the US to obtain her PhD in feedlot nutrition at New Mexico State University. Her research is focused on investigating the relationship between liver abscesses and the microbiome of feedlot cattle and their environment. After completing her studies, she worked as a global feed specialist in innovation with Nutreco, and then she joined Kemin as a senior product manager and later oversaw the ruminant portfolio. She joined dsm-firmenich in 2024 as a ruminant technical expert. So thank you, Dr. Hubbert. We also have with us today Shea Manley. So Shea earned her bachelor's degree in biology from Illinois Tech University in Chicago. She's originally from Michigan, and she began her career as an R&D chemist in the automotive and industrial lubricants industry before relocating to Texas, where she worked in animal nutrition and feed manufacturing. She joined the A&H Fort Worth site in 2019 in several quality roles. And in this role, in these type of roles, she optimized pet and ruminant quality programs. She spearheaded the Vulnerable Species Initiative and supported major site upgrades, including the implementations of the WinCo's process control system. In 2023, Shea became our plant manager for the Fort Worth blend site, and she uses her scientific background and her operations in DLC manufacturing, playing a key role in the development of the new alcohol-free DLC formulations and leading the site's transformation into a high-performing non-pet facility. Now, thank you so much, Shea, for joining us. So let's move on to the presentation. So Dr. Hubbert, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Alex, and good morning to everybody on the call this morning. Let's get this moving. There we go. So why do we need to talk about vitamin form and why does it matter? Well, it matters because we're dealing with relatively low margins when we talk about cattle production units. High feed costs, a fluctuating commodity market, and we're dealing with record highs in terms of the price of feeder cattle, as well as the value of breeding stock, largely attributed to the pressure put on our cattle numbers in the US. So there simply is no space in a cattle diet and a dairy, be it beef, ration, for any ingredients that does not deliver. Vitamins are essential nutrients that optimizes animal health and lifetime performance, included in very small quantities, but it has a significant impact on both health and performance. So which vitamins specifically do we need to supplement our cattle? As I mentioned, vitamins are supplemented in very, very small quantities, measured often in micrograms or milligrams on a per head per day basis. But yet it is essential to support health and performance, and it plays an important role in controlling metabolism. It also plays a lot of interactive functions with other nutrients in the animal. So when we look at the classification of vitamins, we can break it down into water-soluble as well as fat-soluble vitamins. And we talk about cattle nutrition. We mainly supplement today vitamin A, D, and E, and in some cases niacin, thiamine, and beta-carotene on the dairy side of things. Fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and E is not synthesized by ruminal microbes. Vitamin K is synthesized by ruminal microbes, and we also find that in some of the forages. Water-soluble vitamins, the B-complex vitamins, a functional rumen can synthesize adequate levels of B vitamins under normal circumstances. So when we look at young animals, pre-weaning, there we will have to supplement B vitamins. Vitamin C as well as choline is synthesized in the animal endogenously. However, when we look at our high-producing animals, choline would be beneficial for supplementation, specifically during the transition period in our dairy cattle. So if we look into vitamin requirements of cattle in a bit more detail and consider the water-soluble vitamins, we know that the B vitamins are synthesized in the rumen. In terms of storage, very low and insignificant quantities of those B vitamins are actually stored, excluding biotin and folic acid, which is stored predominantly in the liver. We also know that B vitamins is secreted in the milk. And later on, we'll look at an interesting comparison between the levels of vitamins in milk and the requirements of the newborn calf as well. If we consider cobalamin or vitamin B12, we know that this vitamin is generally not considered. It's not a requirement. Ruminal synthesis is sufficient. However, it's important to have adequate levels of cobalt supply in that ration because almost 13% of that dietary cobalt intake can be converted to vitamin B12. And this plays an important role in propionate metabolism in the animal. When it comes to thiamine, the NASEM or the old NRC Beef 2016 and the NASEM recommendations for dairy 2021 does not have a guideline out for supplementation of thiamine. However, our DSM OVN recommendations, when we look at that later on in the presentation, does recommend the supplementation of thiamine specifically for beef cattle, for finishing cattle. And the reason being there is generally ruminal synthesis is sufficient, yes, but especially when we have diets high in concentrates and also high levels of sulfur in the ration or high levels of sulfur in the water, there is a risk for polyencephalomalacia, which is as a result of thiamine breakdown in the rumen. Niacin, generally we don't supply niacin to beef cattle. However, there is a whole body of research supporting the use in dairy cattle because it acts as a vasodilator during heat stress events as well. We do know that tryptophan can be converted to niacin. So overall, we won't be supplying niacin unless there is special circumstances. Choline, just to touch on that, generally in milk replacers, we will be supplying choline. I mentioned earlier it's not a requirement for cattle since it can be produced endogenously. However, there is data in transition cows specifically showing the beneficial effect of supplying a rumen-protected form of choline, considering that the majority of choline, such as with ascorbic acid, will be broken down in the rumen. I'm going to take a bit of time to talk about biotin specifically. There's a lot of research that was conducted in the early 90s, looking at the beneficial effect of biotin in terms of supporting hoof health in both beef and dairy. A lot of work done in beef cattle, grazing cattle, specifically in Canada, as well as dairy. We know that biotin supports the intracellular structure of that hoof horn capsule. And if you look at the image in the bottom of the screen, you'll see on the left-hand side is an image of poor hoof horn capsules comparatively to a cement wall. So you can see those brick walls, it's loosely cemented. So what biotin does, it strengthens the structure of those cells in the hoof horn capsule, making sure that the integrity is in place of that hoof and those animals are less prone to develop hoof lesions and obviously lameness issues later on. So as a result of this research, the old NRC NASEM today does have an advisement or not a recommendation, but a guideline to supplement biotin in both beef and dairy at about 10 to 20 milligrams for beef and 20 to 40 milligrams on a per head per day basis for dairy to support that hoof health. As DSM, we also support that recommendation. In beef cattle, we don't see any performance data supporting supplementation of biotin specifically, apart from the effect on hoof health, integrity, and obviously lameness, which would affect performance in the end, but nothing directly. When we look to dairy, there's a meta-analysis that clearly demonstrates an impact on milk yield. There was almost a 4-pound milk yield response across, I believe it's nine different studies when we supplement biotin at that 40 milligrams per head per day level. On the right-hand side, we can see the importance or the role that endogenous synthesis plays in this vitamin. So as we move the level of concentrate or forage to concentrate in the ration from, say, an 80 to 20% mix down to a 50-50% mix, we see that the amount of biotin that can be synthesized in the rumen, and bear in mind this is an in vitro study, nearly half. So definitely in those higher producing animals where we're feeding high levels of concentrates, it makes sense to supplement biotin in that diet. So now this table, most of you have probably seen before. It's the typical table listing all the deficiency symptoms of vitamins and why we need to supplement vitamins. Excuse me. However, at dsm-firmenich, what we're trying to do with our research portfolio as well is we are moving away from simply trying to keep our production animals out of a state of deficiency. That's simply not good enough anymore. We're not just feeding animals to stay alive and to not be sick. We're feeding them to produce, to be healthy, and to optimize profitability. So instead of focusing just on the deficiency symptoms, which is significant, I mean, vitamin A, we do see cases of night blindness. We are now focused on optimizing that level or that recommendation of supplementation for vitamins to have the maximum response in the animal, be it milk production, be it a response to hot carcass weight gain. And that comes down to our OVN, optimum vitamin nutrition concept. Now, what this means, we are trying to optimize where our specific vitamin recommendations needs to be, also relative to the NASEM recommendations, to have a very specific outcome. So in that deficiency category of vitamin supplementation, those supplementation levels are usually below the NASEM recommendations. That's where you're going to see those clinical signs, deficiency signals in those animals. When we are sitting at NASEM recommended levels, we won't have any of those deficiency symptoms. However, we're still not optimizing health and performance. And research shows that. So with our DSM OVN recommendations, and you'll see this when you compare our recommendations, for example, for vitamin A, vitamin D to the NRC levels, that it's always higher. And there's a very good reason for that. It's based on research. And that's to optimize the performance response of those animals. In certain cases, we'll even have an additional recommendation on top of that optimal recommended level, for example, for vitamin E. And that would be to support a very specific outcome in the animal, such as extending the quality or the shelf life of meat. For example, instead of just supplementing 200 IUs of vitamin E, we will then recommend a 500 level of supplementation. This is our most up-to-date, recently released OVN vitamin guidelines for cattle. If we look, for example, at our fattening component here for beef cattle, we'll see vitamin A recommendations between 40,000 to 80,000 IUs per head per day, vitamin D3 between 5 to 7,000, and also 1 milligram recommended of 25-hydroxy D3 as provided through our Heidi product. That is in addition to the base level vitamin D3. Vitamin E between 500 to 2,000. The reason for those very extreme levels in terms of recommendation is that at a level of 500 IUs per head per day, you can feed your cattle for about 110 days to get an additional 3-4 days of shelf life. You can also achieve that with 2,000 IUs per head per day, just feeding them during that final finishing period of about 42 days. We also do have a thiamine recommendation as well as a biotin recommendation to support hoof health. All of this information is available from your representatives, and it's also nicely composed within the Ruminant OVN handbook, which is a great resource to have in terms of looking up information, all the research studies, the metabolism of vitamins, coefficients of absorption, a very handy resource. Go to this next one. So then to summarize which vitamins we need to supplement and which we don't need to consider, beef and dairy vitamin A, D, and E, those are the basics. 25-hydroxy both in beef and dairy. That's not advised by the NRC. It's a recommendation by DSM through our OVN recommendations based on an elaborate body of research. Biotin recommended for both beef and dairy. Beta-carotene, due to its role it plays in reproductive health support, due to beta-carotene being able to be broken down into retinol in the follicular structures of a cow, we recommend supplementation in our breeding stock and beef, as well as in dairy. Thiamine recommended to be supplemented in our beef cattle, as we discussed, and then niacin and choline in our dairy cattle and not in beef. Let's take a quick look at how the requirements of the newborn calf in terms of vitamins compares to the levels excreted in milk. And we see that it is only vitamin A that's able to supply 100% of the requirements of that calf. Vitamin E is as low as 16%. So this just towards the fact that we really do need to pay close attention to incorporating the adequate amount of vitamins in our calf milk replacers to supply the needs of that newborn calf. There are certain factors that can affect vitamin requirements in cattle. And for me, what always stands out as a number one factor is stress, the impact of stress. There's certainly a lot of research being done today, looking, for example, at the impact of transport stress and how that affects vitamin depletion in beef cattle. We know that transition period in dairy cattle is a highly stressful period as well. Then we need to take into account the nutritional level of the animal. Are they coming off green pastures? What was the beta-carotene levels in those forages? Seasonal fluctuations, which could definitely affect your vitamin D levels, for example. We see a fluctuation of about 74, 75 nanograms per milliliter in the vitamin D status of cattle just as they move from the summer into the winter period. So definitely having to consider all those factors when we determine what the vitamin requirements of our cattle are. So how does a nutritionist then select the right vitamin form? It comes down to a number of factors. So first of all, I want to explain a few concepts that we're going to be discussing moving forward. We're going to be working with a basic or an active ingredient in terms of a vitamin, which would be, for example, if we talk about vitamin E, a DL alpha tocopherol. Then we're going to talk about a vitamin formulation, which is a vitamin active ingredient that we take. We formulate that, we add, for example, oils, other substances, and we put it into a very specific formulation, be it a beadlet formulation, be it spray drying technology, to end up with a micro ingredient, which, for example, would then be a Rovimix vitamin E product that would be supplying vitamin E, but then that micro ingredient would be combined with other micro ingredients within a vitamin trace mineral pack. Also, of course, trace minerals would be included in that pack, as well as perhaps macro ingredients. So we're talking about the basic vitamin, formulating that into a micro ingredient. Now, when we formulate that basic vitamin, we need to consider aspects such as handling. For example, it's very hard to handle that pure micro ingredient. There's safety concerns as well. We need to consider the mixability. So merely taking that active vitamin form and mixing it into a ration is not going to work. Reason being, those particles are not evenly distributed. Particles of those active vitamin forms comes in different shapes and sizes. So we need to make sure by formulating that active ingredient that we create a formulation that allows the nutritionist to provide at an intestinal level to that animal the amount of vitamin that they actually formulated to. So we are considering the bioavailability of that vitamin at an intestinal level as well. We're considering the stability of that vitamin. We know that specific vitamins, as we'll see later, are more affected by ambient conditions, by exposure to light, temperature, pH, for example, than others. So what we'll do in that case then is stabilize that vitamin with a specific or appropriate antioxidant. Then we also need to talk about fitting form to function. Very specific vitamin forms, formulations are selected for a specific application. If we, for example, need to include a vitamin solution in a milk replacer, you need a water-soluble solution. Something different probably will be selected to be included in a molasses-based liquid feed. Then quality monitoring and traceability. I can't talk enough about this. We saw that vitamins are fed at a microgram per head per day basis, very small quantities. A simple decimal error at a supplier level can have huge consequences on farm. Therefore, it's very important to insist that your supplier have a quality monitoring and traceability system in place. Certainly at DSM, we take care in terms of monitoring our process control. Very proud of the homogeneity of our vitamin solutions that we provide. We do regular vitamin spot check monitoring. We test our carriers that's used in those vitamin premix pack formulations regularly for mycotoxins. And we also do regular trace mineral, heavy metal, and dioxin monitoring. So very important in terms of quality control and such a small ingredient.
Dr. Hubbert, I just want to remind the audience at this time that you can ask questions at any time using the Q&A button at the top of your screen. So do not wait, put those questions in and we'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Alex. So fitting form to function, basic vitamin formulations, we've discussed how we take the active ingredient, formulate that with certain technologies into a final product. When we talk about vitamin A in the industry, and there's not a lot of difference in terms of different products in the market, in terms of the technologies, we usually deal with the beadlet or the cross-linked beadlet technology to produce a vitamin A product. So our Rovimix vitamin A 1000 is commonly used in cattle solutions, and that's produced through a beadlet process. Then we also have a spray dried product, which is our Rovimix D3 500. Our vitamin D product is included into a matrix and spray dried. We also have a beadlet form of a combination Rovimix A and D product as well. And then in terms of vitamin E, which is commonly supplemented to cattle as well, it's an adsorbate product where the DL alpha tocopherol is first stabilized with an acetate ligand to stabilize it before feeding. Otherwise, it would have been degraded completely. And then that's adsorbed onto a silica carrier as well. Just briefly here, we see different particle sizes and shapes of our raw basic vitamin forms. If we were not to formulate this into a very specific solution using specific appropriate technology, we would not have a homogeneous mix providing a very consistent targeted level of application in the animal. So considering different vitamin forms, let's focus on vitamin A to E, since that's what's commonly supplemented to cattle today in the feed. And we have access to basically two different forms. We are talking about a dry vitamin trace mineral premix, and then we also have access to dispersible liquid concentrates, which is highly concentrated mixes of vitamins, and we will discuss that in a bit more detail now, that we can also use to deliver vitamin A, D, and E into a liquid feed application on farm. Different technologies we've discussed, and then depending on the application, whether it's going to be a dry vitamin formulation form or a liquid dispersible liquid concentrate form, we will optimize the use of very specific antioxidants, be it ethoxyquin or butylated hydroxytoluene, to make this product very suitable for its intended use. So let's talk about Rovimix DLCs. Now, dispersible liquid concentrates are colloidal dispersions of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and E that's mixed with food-grade emulsifiers and solvents. dsm-firmenich has really been a pioneer in this area over probably the last 30 years. And we produce our dispersible liquid concentrates out of our blending plant in Fort Worth, Texas. And you're going to take a look at a plant tour a little bit later that Shea will share with us. We can supply vitamin A, D, and E through this dispersible liquid concentrate. And it's a very stable manner of supplying vitamins to our cattle. It's a unique formulation in that it's dispersible in liquid feeds. We can mix these dispersible liquid concentrates with thycotropic mixtures, which is basically the viscous molasses-based liquid feeds. It's stable at a variety of temperatures. So even in extreme climates where we have extreme fluctuations between winter and summer, we know that there's no separation of this vitamin mix. It stays in suspension at temperatures as high as 120 degrees Fahrenheit and as low as 1 degrees Fahrenheit. And even let's consider the temperatures would drop between that 1 degree Fahrenheit. You can still heat that solution, say for 25 minutes to an hour at about 100 degrees Fahrenheit without risking any damage to the stability of the vitamins in that DLC. So it doesn't gel. It's a very handy application to mix your vitamins A, D, and E into your liquid feed supplements. Also very good stability at pH levels at or above 3. As available, so comparatively to dry forms, bioavailability is similar, and it's emulsifiable as well. So in terms of application through micro machines, concentrated liquid supplements, free choice liquid supplements in the field, this would be a suitable way to dispense your vitamins. In terms of shelf life, DLCs are superior compared to the dry vitamin forms. Just a quick comparisons. If there is any vitamin A in the dispersible liquid concentrate, we advise about a year shelf life period, and you can stretch that to almost 2 years if that solution does not contain any vitamin A, considering that vitamin A is the most or the least stable vitamin of the ones that we supplement cattle with. Comparatively to dry formulas, our dry vitamin forms, if there's no choline chloride, which is very corrosive to other vitamins, and it reduces the stability of vitamins significantly. In that formulation, we're working on about a 6-month storage period or shelf life. And with choline chloride, you bring that down to about 3 months. So definitely an improvement in terms of the shelf life when we're using a liquid dispersible concentrate compared to the dry form. Quickly looking at the stability of the raw or the basic vitamin. So without stabilizing it with a ligand, such as acetate, for example, we know that vitamin A is the most reactive vitamin. It's very much affected by temperature, humidity, oxygen, light, such as vitamin D as well. And then vitamin E specifically affected by different range and pH, low pH, high pH as well. So when we formulate these basic vitamins, we do stabilize them with a ligand, include an antioxidant, for example, before incorporating that into the technologies. So let's take a look at some of the stability data of vitamins. This study was done in our Netherlands lab where we included Rovimix A, which is a way to supply our vitamin A into a pelleted feed. This was a broiler feed. So it was a corn soy-based diet. We pelletized that at 194 degrees Fahrenheit for only 35 seconds for a short period of time, very high temperatures. And we see there that we still had about 100% retention. If you look at the green bars, it's basically 2 of our vitamin A supplements, Rovimix A and Rovimix AD, compared to the gray bars, which will show you some competitor products. So looking at our Rovimix products, there was about 100% retention still, even after exposure to those high temperatures, just showing that that technology allows the stability of that product. Now, in this study, Rovimix A was also included into a very aggressive vitamin trace mineral pack or premix. This premix pack contained about 15% choline chloride, which we mentioned earlier is very corrosive in a trace mineral pack or vitamin pack. And then after 1 month of retention, and the ambient conditions was about 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 65% relative humidity, we still had an 86% vitamin A retention with Rovimix, and after 3 months retention, that reduced down to 75%. And that's mainly the reason why we recommend when there's choline chloride in your vitamin trace mineral mix to only keep it for a period of 3 months as opposed to 6 months in the absence of choline chloride. Real quick, vitamin E stability, also in an aggressive ruminant premix. When we have magnesium oxide in that premix, that's also highly corrosive. After a 6-month storage period, that reduced the vitamin E retention down to 70%. There's about a 20% difference in vitamin retention just by adding that high level of magnesium oxide. So it just highlights the importance of when we formulate these different vitamin trace mineral packs to consider the other ingredients included in that trace mineral pack. Trace minerals have an impact on vitamin stability, such as carriers, diluents, as well as, for example, choline chloride and magnesium oxide. This work shows an internal evaluation that we did last year, looking at the inclusion of our high-dose Rovimix solution, 25-hydroxy-D3, directly into a liquid molasses-based feed supplement period. And we see that in this liquid feed supplement, even after a 4-month period, there was still almost 120% recovery of that product. Again, just highlighting the stability of the ligand used in this technology, and that the product is protected adequately. So what makes a good premix? When we evaluate a premix, we look at the most appropriate, most stable vitamin form for the intended application. We need to consider the route of application. Are we working with micro machines? Are we working with tubs out on the grazing? Are we working with milk replacers or liquid molasses-based feeds? And based on that information, we select the appropriate vitamin form. So we need to consider flowability, the mixability of that vitamin mix, and the handling characteristics as well. We need consistent particle sizes. We need consistent particle sizes amongst different ingredients. Different ingredients included in that premix pack will have a different distribution of particle size, for example, and that all affects the handling and the flowability of that solution. We tend to limit the moisture content of that VTM pack to about 12%. And then we need to select the appropriate carrier for that premix as well as a diluent where needed. We also include mineral oil, for example, at about 1%, just to reduce the dustiness of that pack. And then vitamin stability is an important consideration. What is the pH going to be of your feed application? If that would be different for a liquid feed compared to a meal, for example. And then also the maximum moisture content in the feed, as well as the ambient conditions around storing, how quickly is the turnaround time of the liquid feeds, for example. All of that information is going to dictate which vitamin solution would suit the purpose for application. So a micro premix or a trace mineral pack is then a homogeneous blend of low inclusion micro ingredients distributed through a carrier. So as we mentioned, flowability is really important when we look at our premix formulation. The bulk density needs to be considered in addition to the particle size distribution, uniformity of those particles, otherwise we risk segregation. It's an investment to add vitamins to a ration. We need to make sure that we don't have any of that segregation. Dustiness affects, for example, our worker health, safety issues, contamination risk, especially in a feed mill if there's a lot of dust. And then we also need to consider, as I mentioned earlier, the other ingredients in the pack, specifically trace minerals that can be quite corrosive to vitamin stability. Are there any other ingredients, for example, that needs to be included in this vitamin trace mineral mix that we cannot measure accurately? Sometimes some inclusion levels are so small that you can't accurately measure that. That has an implication. And then also, is there a need for an antioxidant in that vitamin pack to further improve the stability of the vitamins? So briefly talking about premix carriers, here in the States, we predominantly use rice hulls as our premix carrier for our cattle vitamin trace mineral mixes. And in Canada, we use more wheat middlings. All of these carriers have different particle sizes, bulk density, so that obviously affects the packaging of the vitamin trace mineral mixes as well. But it's an art form almost to select the appropriate amount and type of premix carrier to be included in the vitamin trace mineral mix, because that affects the homogeneity of the overall VTM pack, and that prevents degradation by supplying the ideal particle size distribution. Then we talk about premix diluents. Now, a diluent such as limestone is not a carrier. It doesn't absorb because a carrier is an organic matter. A carrier absorbs the vitamins and ingredients onto that matter. Limestone, for example, just dilutes the whole mixture down. It has advantages that it improves, for example, the flowability of the vitamin trace mineral mix. However, it doesn't have any carrier capabilities at all. There's also a lot of variation, for example, in limestone, going from a fine particle size back to a coarse particle size. All of those have a place in formulating your vitamin trace mineral mix. Here we're taking a look at the ideal particle size distribution within our VTM pack. Now, if we were to use, for example, rice hulls on the left with limestone, so rice hulls as the carrier, limestone as the diluting agent, and on the right-hand side, we'll have only limestone, no carrier. You'll see that when we use a carrier on the left-hand side, we have a normal or a bell distribution in terms of particle size distribution. That is ideal. That's what we want. And that's really the reason why we are including a carrier in this vitamin trace mineral mix, as opposed to a very skewed distribution and segregation of particle sizes when we don't use a premix carrier. This is a nice demonstration of that fact. What we did here is it's a VTM that included IntelliBond copper. We selected this ingredient just for the color and mixed that with different carriers just to show you how important it is to mix or match the particle size of the carrier with that of the specific ingredient. And we can see here by mixing the basic copper chloride with ascorbic acid, for example, those particle sizes are much more evenly mixed. So really considering the amount of ingredients that goes into a vitamin trace mineral packs, it's really a skill to accurately match the inclusion level and the type of carrier diluting agents to make sure that we protect the stability of the vitamins and that the product will still be flowable and not segregate in the animal feed application at customer level. So briefly, I want to discuss some of the dsm-firmenich expertise in terms of being able to supply customers with the expertise to formulate a vitamin trace mineral pack. We've spoken about the OVN, optimum vitamin nutrition concept earlier. DSM has done a lot of work over the last probably 50 years, trying to bring out regularly a set of recommendations for vitamins based on research. We also have access to our TMAS, our Technical Marketing and Analytical Services Laboratory in Parsippany, New Jersey. Within that laboratory, we're able to determine the vitamin status of animals. Customers submit various samples. So it's very much a supportive function that we're able to run troubleshooting through, assist with research studies as well. Then we also have access to our Romer labs that's located in Union, Missouri, where we do our routine mycotoxin screening through, also supporting customers through that process. And then what I want to focus on for a minute is the nutritional services team. This team of ours is our expert vitamin trace mineral pack formulation team, and they're based in Air Canada. The entire team at least have a master's degree in animal science. They definitely have a lot of expertise in matching different feed ingredients, selecting the appropriate carriers at the right levels, and assisting customers based on the requirements at customer level to come up with a vitamin trace mineral solution that will perform on farm as well. So they have expert premix formulation knowledge, and then they can also assist customers with some regulatory and production claims as well. So definitely a benefit to be able to have access to such a team of experts when formulating that vitamin trace mineral pack. Then taking a look at our manufacturing sites around the world, we'll focus today on our North American sites. And we have a blending facility in Ames, Iowa, Cambridge, Ontario, in Canada, Pendergrass, Georgia, and then we have a blending facility in Fort Worth, Texas. And out of that blending facility, we produce our dispersible liquid concentrates as well. And it's going to be this blending facility that Shea will share with you today through a plant tour. So sit back and take a look at the tour of the plant.
Manley. I'm the site manager here at the Fort Worth Blend Plant. This is where we make our dispersible liquid concentrates, or DLCs. Come on in and I'll give you a tour. This is our on-site warehouse. This is where we keep all of our raw materials as well as all finished goods that are undergoing quality review. Everything that we manufacture here at the Fort Worth blend site undergoes quality review. And here, let me show you our lab. Here's our on-site lab. This is our NIR, or near infrared spectrometer. Everything that we manufacture, as well as raw materials that we receive, are run on our NIR. And basically what the NIR does is that it takes a fingerprint of the material so we can compare it against a like standard. So for example, we ran a sample of our E600 DLC premix and looks at its spectra to make sure it has what it's supposed to and it looks like everything else. I'll show you the rest of the warehouse. This is our sample retain area. We keep samples of all raw materials as well as finished goods that go through our site here. We have both finished goods, premix, as well as DLCs and raw materials, flushes, and we keep everything for at least 1 year. Everything is categorized as well as numbered, so we're able to pull a retain for something within 5 minutes. Here's our receiving area, where we inspect everything that comes to the Fort Worth site for production. This is where we actually apply the process control system labels as well as start the inspection process to receive the raw material. Here's actually an example of vitamin A-firmenich we received in yesterday. So everything that we receive in is documented on this form, where we document both the supplier, manufacturer, which we check to make sure are both approved supplier and manufacturers for that raw material. We make sure that the lot number that we received matches the rest of the documentation. A sample is also collected, which is then turned into the quality department, which then goes on NIR, and they review the C of A. So from what I can tell, this material has already been reviewed by quality. It checked both the approved supplier and the approved manufacturer, as well as all C of A requirements. So this product was released and ready for production. Here's some of the DLC ingredients we actually keep in the warehouse and are in our bulk tanks. We have our propylene glycol right here. One thing that I do want to point out is retain for something within 5 minutes. Here's our receiving area, where we inspect everything. So everything that we receive in manufacturer, which we check to make sure our lot number, that sample is also collected, which is then turned. So from what I can tell, this material has already been reviewed by quality. It checked both the approved supplier and the requirements. So this product was released and ready for production. Here's some of the DLC ingredients we actually keep in the warehouse and are in our bulk tanks. We have our propylene glycol right here. One thing that I do want to point out is
Looks like we're running into a couple of technical difficulties with that video. Give us 1 minute to fix it.
Alex, I believe if there's any questions, we perhaps can take any questions in the meantime while you're trying to get that video up.
That will be great. We do have at least one question, Dr. Hubbert. So this person says, I have been using a dry vitamin trace mineral pack for years, but feed a lot of liquid molasses-based feeds. Should I change to a DLC?
Alex, obviously we would like to have some more information on that question, but I think what we've seen today is comparing just in terms of stability and ease of use for inclusion of a vitamin mix, AD&E, into a molasses-based liquid feed supplement. A DLC application form is most likely more applicable or suitable compared to a dry form for sure. But we would like to have a conversation to get some more details. But yes, my answer to that would be yes. Let's see if we can get that video back up and running.
The process control system label. We make sure that the law department warehouse and are in our bulk tanks. We have our propylene glycol right here. One thing that I do want to point out is
Alex, I don't believe that video is going to come back online. So perhaps let's jump into the Q&A session. And we can even, I think we have Shea on the call herself today. So if there's questions from the audience to Shea, our plant manager at our Fort Worth blending plant, we can address that.
Okay, I do have a couple of other questions. We received a question, why are your OVN recommendations so much higher for basically all vitamins compared to the NRC? Your vitamin E levels in particular are especially high. Dr. Hubbert?
Alex, yes, I think we touched on that during the presentation as well. Generally, we have our NASM recommendations 2016 for beef and then dairy 2021. Our OVN recommendations are higher, specifically for vitamins A, D, and E, based on optimizing health and performance. When we talk about vitamin E specifically, it's usually to extend color case life of meat. We're talking about a 500 to 2,000 IUs of supplementation, depending on the feeding period in beef cattle. So in general, the recommendations are higher, again, to optimize. We're not just keeping animals out of a deficiency category, we're trying to optimize performance and health to ultimately impact profitability as well. So there's a very good reason based on research data. And we're also happy to supply some of that data should customers need that.
Wonderful. We did just receive another question. So let's take a look at that one. I find your biotin data interesting, and I'm considering it for my high-producing dairy cows. Would the benefit justify the expense?
Alex, I'll take that one. I think certainly from a cost investment, yes, there is that investment with biotin. However, we've seen the data, if we look at dairy, that meta-analysis, it always creates some assurance as well. amongst a distribution of different research studies, we see that impact on milk yield, and then also a whole body of evidence to support that improvement in terms of hoof health support, both in beef and dairy, with supplementation of biotin. So with that additional milk yield response, I believe we saw a 3.95 pound response in milk yield. Whether we're going to see that every time, that's a question we'll have to have. But certainly that hoof health response, we see that coming through time and time again. So from, I'd say, a cow comfort, health, performance response, that investment justifies the need for sure. So there's a positive return for biotin supplementation. Alex, you're on mute.
So sorry, I muted myself.
Yeah.
A couple more questions. Do you offer DRC formulations that offer multiple vitamins, say D&E in one?
Currently, and Shea, please jump in there, being our plant expert. Currently, we offer a DLC product that contains different combinations of vitamin A, D, and E.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. So right now, the DLC portfolio only has the liquid forms of A, D, and E. And we're not currently having any other vitamins in them.
Okay. There was a specific question about the video. If we're not able to get the video working, can it be shared afterwards? Absolutely. We will make sure the follow-up email that contains a recording of this presentation, we will also include a link to the video so you can watch the full video. It is about 8 minutes in length. We got to about halfway, so there is another half that specifically talks about DLC, so we'll make sure all of you have access to it. Okay, let's see. Any more questions? I think that covers all of the questions that we have. So last opportunity for the audience, in case you want to submit, please submit it to the Q&A button. We'll give it a second, but I want to thank Dr. Hubbert and Shea for joining us today. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties with the videos, but we worked through them. We will make sure that the audience has access to both that. You can also visit our website at dsm-firmenich/premixes. We have really nice videos for all 4 of our plants here in North America. It gives you a really good flavor of the type of products, the locations, and the manufacturing we do there. And we also plan on adding Shea's video in the Fort Worth section here shortly. So I don't see any more questions coming through right now. So with that, we're going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you so much for attending, and you will receive a recording email here shortly. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.